I think that, personally, I've looked at Mr. Sarbanes' plan. I don't agree with it. I don't agree with, once again, having more government spending to, entice less campaign fundraising. But overall, my major issue is that these individuals do have great relationships with each other. They have no problem having relationships with each other because they've spent, 20, 30 years in Congress. So, they have no problem. I mean, our congressman has been in office, for 3 terms? So he's been there for 6 years. I can't imagine that he's had any problems, creating relationships. What we need to do is we need to put in place term limits, and that would avoid, that would get rid of your issues with fundraising and campaigning, because PACs are not going to spend that kind of money to fund these campaigns any longer.
We have a little bit of time. I'm going to take a little bit of a time privilege and give a 30-second rebuttal on that same thing. We'll start with would be Mr. Sarbanes first. 30-second rebuttal.
Well, I just wanted to respond to this suggestion that I don't permit people to protest in this country. The bill that's being referred to was to fix this situation. You may remember that we had protesters showing up at the funerals of our fallen heroes. And there was a great outcry at this, and there was an attempt to put some kind of boundaries in place. It was judged by the courts that those boundaries were too strict. And so what the bill we passed seeks to do is create a new set of parameters on what's permissible in terms of those sorts of demonstrations without crossing the constitutional line. If it turns out that doesn't work, we'll be back to the drawing board.
Thank you, Mr. Drogas.
Just to speak about that, I think Mr. Sarbanes did comment that with the intent of keeping these protesters away from our soldiers' funerals and everything else. I just think that the overall bill was a bad idea, and it was poorly constructed. It just needs to go back to the drawing board and start over. That's it.
Last 30-second rebuttal, Mr. Knowles.
Congress shall make no law against the freedom of speech, against the freedom of assembly, against the freedom to redress your government for grievances. Is our First Amendment in our Bill of Rights. So we don't make laws against that because it has unintended bad consequences, as we saw, like I mentioned, with people getting arrested out there. And I'm not even sure if we're speaking about the same bill, since the bill doesn't mention anything about funerals in there. It mentions Secret Service and national security events. So once again, you should read everything that you vote on in Congress.
We have time for a 1-minute closing statement. We start out with Mr. Drogas, and we will return to Mr. Drogas on a 1-minute closing statement.
Once again, I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I want to thank Anne Arundel Community College for allowing me to be a part of this panel. I've appreciated that the Anne Arundel County, Howard County, especially the League of Women Voters, and they've opened their doors to me, and they've allowed me to be on the stage with the Republican and Democrat candidate. So that's been everybody's been very good to me throughout this process. I've tried to make my arguments, straightforward and logical. Some people will agree, some people won't. The truth is that I just don't believe in the current two-party system. I think that there's too many problems, and I think that basically they are, they'll just play each other off each other. They play off each other and create scenarios for you as voters to get behind, which there's no real relevance to in the end.
Thank you, Mr. Drogas. Mr. Knowles, final minute statement.
I'd like to thank everyone for being out here tonight, and it's, once again, like I say, it's good to be back here where I went to school and feel comfortable in these surroundings. And I would also like to thank my opponents for being up here. Throughout this entire process we had, I'm sad, actually, this is the last chance I think we're going to get to do this, because it has been fun. And I want to just say there's really nothing personal behind it. I have beholden to defend the Constitution. I have to do that. It's not anything against you personally. I've invited you out for beer, hopefully sometime after this whole entire process. I extend the same thing to Mr. Drogos. Hope we can actually go out all together and be friends. But folks, you have a choice this election, and that choice is going to boil down to if you want to have more government in your life, if you want to continue to go down the same path that we've been going down, whether it's a presidential 4-year or whether they've been in for 6 years. You got to think back to 6 years ago. Were you better off then than you are now? And if you're not, then it's time to really make a different decision.
Final closing statement, Mr. Sarbanes.
I want to thank my colleagues here for their participation in this. I want to thank the college. I want to thank Mr. Knowles for this copy of the Constitution. I will add it to the others that I have in my possession. I want to thank the Annapolis and Anne Arundel County Chamber of Commerce, along with the college, for sponsoring this. What I always like to say in these closings is that I can't promise people that I will agree with them 100% of the time. What I can promise is that in conducting my responsibilities, I will try to adhere to 3 basic principles. The first is that I will listen as carefully as I can, not just pay lip service to that, but really, really listen. And I think I benefit from being able to come home every night in doing that. The second is that I will try to maintain my integrity in the job. And the third is that I'll work as hard as I can. And I really do believe that if you assemble in any place of government, whether it be Washington or Annapolis, a critical mass of people that are committed to those 3 basic principles, that most of the time they'll make good, solid, sound public policy. And I can commit to that. I take nothing for granted. If I'm lucky enough to be reelected, I will work as hard as I can for you. Thank you.
Thank you. And this concludes our first segment. Please join me in thanking the candidates right now.